When did karma hit the exact second someone said, "You'll regret this"? Story 1. I was the quiet controller at a mid-sized logistics firm where our CFO, Damon, had a reputation for visionary cost-cutting and louder cufflinks than personality. When I found duplicate vendor payments looping back to a shell company, I went through the policy, documented, escalated, nothing. Damon found out, strode into my office, and, hand to marble desk, hissed, "You'll regret this." 2 days later, we had the quarterly all-hands on Zoom. Damon was presenting our record margins, screen sharing a deck with too much clip art. My audit file was already locked with our outside counsel, but I kept smiling like the meek spreadsheet goblin everyone assumed I was. Then the exact second he repeated, "This is what integrity looks like," his Slack pinged, audible, because he'd left notifications on. A preview banner unfolded across the top of his screen to 400 employees. From Jared, accounts. Message? Deleted the slush folder like you asked, but legal is asking why vendor checks were reissued. There was a silence I've only heard before in data centers when the power fails. Damon scrambled, hit Do Not Disturb, accidentally clicked back to his desktop where a tidy folder tree sat. Q3 narrative, media talking points, and front and center, slush, reappeared from the trash because he had quick restore. HR's window popped up in his dock like an accusing eye. Then another Slack banner from our outside counsel. "Please stop deleting files. Litigation hold is in effect." He looked into the camera and tried to laugh. Then my phone buzzed, the audit committee chair asking me to join a breakout now. When we returned to the main call, Damon was gone from the grid. Someone had removed him. The security walked him past my glass wall an hour later. He didn't look at me. The board statement hit LinkedIn by dusk. The exact timestamp on the filing, 3:14 p.m., was the minute his Slack flashed slush. I didn't gloat. I went home, watered my basil, and opened an offer letter from the interim CEO to lead finance. On page 2, right under the salary, was a line I'd never expected to see in corporate. "Thank you for your integrity." Damon always said numbers tell stories. Turns out they told his too.
Story 2. I was 12 when my parents' custody war hit the courthouse. By then, I'd learned to pack a backpack like a refugee. One hoodie at Dad's, one at Mom's, my journal in both. We were in Department 403, Judge Patel presiding, the kind of room that makes you whisper. Mom's lawyer showed calendars and claimed Dad was inconsistent. Dad's lawyer showed receipts and called Mom erratic. I stared at the fake wood paneling and every second felt like syrup. Then Mom leaned across the table during a recess, kept her smile for the bailiff, and breathed in my ear, "Tell them what I told you to say or you'll regret this." The words were minty and sharp. I froze, because the thing about being 12 is everyone tells you who you are. When we went back on record, the judge asked if I wanted to speak privately. I said yes. In chambers, just the court reporter, the judge, and me, my hands shook so hard the water glass clinked. Judge Patel said, "There's no right answer. There's only your answer." I took out the old iPod Touch Dad had given me. I told her I recorded piano practice on it. I also recorded something else by accident. Mom, the night she'd thrown my duffel down the stairs for smelling like him, saying into the phone that if she couldn't have me full-time, she'd make sure Dad ate mud in court. The judge listened with headphones, eyes wet but steady. Then she asked, "Do you feel safe living primarily with your father?" I said yes. "He keeps my toothbrush." Back in the courtroom, the judge spoke carefully. Joint legal custody, primary physical with Dad, structured therapy for Mom, and a prohibition on disparaging the other parent in my presence. Mom's mouth became a straight line that could cut paper. She stared at me as if I'd pulled a lever that opened the floor. The bailiff handed Dad a box of tissues, and him being him, he passed one to Mom first. She didn't take it. That night, my toothbrush didn't travel. Years later, after college, I found the iPod in a drawer and almost deleted the file. I didn't. I mailed it to myself at my new apartment, like a time capsule. The subject line read, "Proof 12-year-old me was brave." Mom and I are better now. Therapy and time doing what court couldn't. But whenever I hear someone whisper, "You'll regret this," to a kid, my stomach remembers the courtroom carpet. Karma didn't come with handcuffs. It came with a toothbrush that stopped moving.
Story 3. I was the photographer at a winery wedding where the couple had met in a Reddit thread about sourdough starters. They were adorable and relentlessly DIY. The maid of honor, Cass, pulled me aside during golden hour and said, "Just make sure you get his face when I do my toast." That's never a chill sentence, but I've learned to ride the chaos like a skateboard. Dinner moved inside the barrel room, chandeliers like inverted spider webs. I set my camera to burst mode, and Cass took the mic. She opened sweet. College memories, how the bride taught her to hold grief with both hands. Then she shifted, eyes glittering. And to my new brother-in-law, she said, "You told my sister she'd regret it if she ever checked your phone again." The groom smiled tight. Cass raised a glass. "So let's talk about regret." At the exact second she said it, the projector behind them lit up. I hadn't said it. A slideshow started. Not the childhood photos we'd prepped, but screenshots. Timestamps, locations, a parade of "you up" messages sent the week of his bachelor party to someone saved as Theresa, catering. The room exhaled. The groom lunged for the laptop. It wasn't there. The venue's new AV system streamed from a hidden Chromecast Cass had plugged in behind the barrels during cocktail hour. Security moved. The bride stood like a struck bell. The groom sputtered about context. Then the last slide hit. A selfie of him and Theresa in the coat room from earlier that afternoon. Time-stamped 10 minutes after the first look. Same boutonniere skewed at the same angle. He had texted, "She'll never know. If she confronts me, she'll regret it." The bride didn't throw her bouquet. She took off her ring, placed it in her champagne, and handed the flute to her husband without breaking eye contact. "Enjoy something sparkling," she said. No screaming. Just the kind of quiet you can frame. Then the venue coordinator, a soft-spoken man with an excellent mustache, cleared his throat into the mic. "We have paid for tonight. The bar is open. The dance floor is still the dance floor. If you love the bride, stay and celebrate her." And the guests did. They danced like a boot was finally off a chest. I shot her laughing with her grandmother, mascara streaked, head thrown back, starting a mosh pit to Lizzo. On my way out, Cass slipped me a USB and whispered, "Backups of the backups." I asked her how she knew. She said he told her to regret checking his phone, so I checked his smartwatch. Story 4. Our Thanksgiving was a competitive sport. My Aunt June wielded recipes like subpoenas, and my father, the eldest, collected debts nobody remembered incurring. I, the eldest daughter, was the family's designated peacemaker. I basted, I timed, I hid political magazines. This year, Dad announced we'd do inheritance talk like adults over pie. I reached for the whipped cream like it was a shield. After dishes, he wrapped a spoon on his mug and said the house would pass to me eventually, but there were conditions about keeping June's son on the deed for appearances. June smiled thinly, squeezing my wrist too long. I said I wasn't interested in appearances. Dad's face hardened. "Don't be ungrateful," he said. "If you fight this, you'll regret it." Gran, who'd been quiet all day, asked for her old cedar recipe box. I fetched it, smelling like childhood and clothes. She plucked out not cards, but letters, postmarks from 1986, tied with kitchen twine. "If we're speaking as adults," she said, "we should use the grown-up facts." She handed the stack to me. They were between her and a neighbor I only knew as Mr. Daly, the widower with soft hands who taught us to prune roses. The letters undid our family with gentleness. My conception dated months after Dad left for basic training, a hospital photo of Gran and Mr. Daly holding me with eyes I've always seen in the mirror. June grabbed one, skimmed, and laughed too loudly. "So you're Daly's. Big deal. The deed stands." She said it like a dare. Gran took out one more paper folded so many times it had seniority, a notarized addendum recorded 10 months earlier, transferring the house into a life estate for Gran and, upon her death, to my eldest granddaughter, legally or otherwise. Mr. Daly had been the witness. Dad went white. June sputtered about undue influence. Gran looked at me, not unkindly. "Your father has always been my son, and you, my girl, are my girl. The house is yours. The conditions are gone. I won't be buried under leverage." The exact second Dad started to say, "You'll regret this," his phone buzzed. A text from the county clerk's office, automated, but perfectly timed. "Deed transfer recorded." His voice cracked on the last word. We didn't eat pie. We sat in a new silence, not empty, but spacious. Later, I found Mr. Daly's rose clippers in the garage, oiled and wrapped. The note on them then Gran's tidy hand read, "For when you prune back what doesn't serve the bloom." I slept in my old room that night, under a ceiling that suddenly felt like it belonged to me, and no one's conditions.
Story 5. Our neighborhood HOA president, Bryce, treated the Facebook group like a throne room. He wrote rules in Comic Sans and fines in bold. When Maya from 14B asked where the dues were going, he posted a photo of her weeds and captioned it, "Some people should focus on their own yard." She commented back with spreadsheets. She's an accountant, asking for bank statements. He replied, "Keep poking around and you'll regret this." The next day, Maya put a motion on the agenda for the monthly meeting at the clubhouse. She brought cookies and a 3-binder audit. Bryce sauntered in late with sunglasses and a Bluetooth earpiece, did that two-handed clap coaches use when they want everyone to shut up, and announced he'd lost receipts in a Google Drive issue. He wagged a finger at Maya like she was a toddler. We just reached new business when a city truck rolled up outside. Two inspectors stepped in, asked for President Bryce. He puffed up. "We're in the middle of—" One inspector, not unkind, lifted a tablet. "Sir, we're responding to complaints about unpermitted construction at your address." Bryce scoffed. "My address is fine." The inspector rotated the tablet to show a live map and, this is the part that felt like a movie, an aerial photo from the city's new assessment drone, time-stamped that morning. It showed Bryce's backyard with a very obvious new pool dug to the water table, a half-built cabana, and 3 pallets of HOA pavers stacked neatly beside it. You could see the HOA stamp on the shrink wrap. Maya didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The inspector scrolled. Truck rental receipts, billed to the HOA card, security footage from the clubhouse loading dock with Bryce whistling while he loaded pavers at midnight, and a lovely little selfie of Bryce in aviators reflected in the clubhouse door he'd propped open. He'd posted it to the HOA Facebook the week before with the caption, "Your fearless leader putting in late hours." Metadata did the rest. The exact second Bryce tried the phrase, "You'll regret this, all of you," his Bluetooth chirped with an incoming call. On the screen, City Attorney. The inspector answered for him on speaker. "Mr. Halverson, please do not move any materials," the voice said. "We're issuing a stop work order and a subpoena for records." By sunset, the HOA bank account was frozen, an interim board formed. Maya didn't even nominate herself. She nominated Mrs. Patel from 9C, and the pavers were stacked back at the clubhouse like the world healing a little. Bryce resigned for personal reasons. A week later, we had a block party. Potluck, no permits required, and kids chalked hopscotch over the oil stains from Bryce's truck. Someone drew a blue rectangle and labeled it Permitted Pool.
Maya laughed for the first time in months. Karma didn't just hit, it showed up with receipts and a drone photo, clear enough to see the ring he forgot to take off while stealing from all of us.
Story 6. Our department's seminar room had that stale coffee smell, unique to academia and regret. I'm a fourth-year PhD, the lab mule who fixes everyone's code. Our golden child was a postdoc named Rowan, press-ready jawline, a nature cover on his vision board, and a habit of refactoring other people's data into his. I'd flagged irregularities in his raw files, duplicated noise patterns, timestamps that jumped like a scratched CD. He called me dramatic. The morning of his thesis-adjacent talk to the donors, I printed my concerns and went to our PI, Dr. Voss, thinking, naively, that truth has tenure. She didn't look up from her email. "Don't make waves," she said, then summoned Rowan. He leaned on my desk like we were buddies and murmured, smiling for the undergrads, "You'll regret this." The talk started. Rowan clicked to slide 12, real-time replication. He'd built a flashy live demo where a Python notebook fetched our data repository and reproduced his graphs. Proof, he said, of rock-solid reproducibility. He loved theater. What he didn't love was Git. Over the weekend, I'd locked the repo and added a post-commit hook that logged file histories to the screen if anyone tried to overwrite raw data during a live poll. At the exact second he said, "As you can see, this pipeline is transparent," the projector vomited a list of earlier file names. Mouse 03 raw.csv to mouse 09 raw.csv to mouse 09 raw.v2.csv, checksums identical. Then an auto-rendered diff appeared, highlighting columns he'd copy-pasted and jittered with synthetic noise. The auditorium went monastery-level silent. A donor with a biotech startup asked, very gently, "Is this expected?" Voss grabbed the clicker. Rowan started a sentence that tripped on its own laces. The terminal kept talking, user, R-O, onin, timestamp stamped, like footprints through wet cement. The department chair stood, cleared his throat, and asked me to join him in the hall. We walked by a poster with our lab name printed too big. He said they'd convene research integrity immediately, and until then, would I secure all the lab servers, and, this is where my stomach flipped, step in to co-lead the grant's remaining aims. Rowan resigned before lunch. Voss took medical leave. The undergrads left a sticky note on my door that said simply, "Thanks for not gaslighting us." In the quiet after the emails, I went back to my terminal and reran the pipeline on real data from our quietest mouse. The graph was uglier. It was also true. Sometimes karma is not a thunderclap. It's a version history nobody thought you'd read aloud.
Story 7. I was the dishwasher at a cramped izakaya that smelled like char and miracles. Our head cook, Layla, ran the line like a string quartet. Click, hiss, chorus. The owner, a swaggering man named Tarek, paid in envelopes and promised exposure. When Layla asked for back wages, he laughed. When she mentioned organizing a tip pool, he stabbed the ticket rail with his pen. "Keep pushing," he said, "and you'll regret this." 2 weeks later, we were at the city's night market, our booth a temple of skewers, a line looping like a treble clef. A foodie influencer, ring light haloed, went live right in front of us. Tarek came for her camera like a moth. He loved attention. Behind him, I watched Layla's eyes flick to the cooler. She'd told him all week the seafood delivery smelled wrong. He'd told her to use more chili oil. As the live stream hit 20K viewers, a man in a windbreaker with the city seal stepped up. "Pop the cooler," he said. Tarek puffed. "We're busy." Windbreaker didn't blink. He lifted a thermometer, cracked a tub of oysters, and showed the reading to the influencer's audience. The comments sped. "Room temp? No ice? I can smell that through my phone." Tarek sneered, gestured at Layla. She left the lid off. He swung toward me. "Back me up or you'll—" He didn't finish. The inspector pulled a printed complaint with photos, timestamped deliveries, invoices paid in cash, a rack of Tarek's venue fee envelopes. The file credit line made my heart drop and bloom at the same time. Submitted by Culinary Workers Collective, Chapter 19. Layla had been busy.
The exact second Tarek barked, "You'll regret this, all of you," his voice went tinny. The influencer had tapped her mic to make sure it was picking up. It was. 30,000 people heard him threaten the staff while the inspectors zip-tied our lids shut and posted a bright orange closure notice like a sunrise. We thought that was the end. It wasn't. The market manager offered Layla a temporary stall for proof of concept. We pulled the Venmo tips that strangers sent after the live stream. Within a month, Skewer and Union opened in the vacant bodega on 9th, co-op-owned, chalk menu, legal as a prayer. On our first night, the influencer came in quietly, no camera, and ordered the oysters. Ice cold, lemon like a bell. She left cash and a note. Spicy, perfect, unionized. Tarek opened a ghost kitchen under a new name across town. He posted an ad hiring self-starters. The comments asked about his coolers. He turned them off. We kept ours humming.
Story 8. My brother-in-law, Felix, is a landlord with the soul of a collection notice. He buys old fourplexes, paints the letters F and X on the dumpsters, and calls it community building. I rent in one of his places because life is a circle and sometimes it's choking you. When a leak opened over my girlfriend Noor's desk, pouring coffee-colored water on her thesis, I texted Felix. He wrote, "Bleach it. Stop manufacturing drama." When Noor filed a 311 complaint, Felix called me, laughing. "Tell your little activist to back off or you'll regret this, both of you." I'm not good at threats. Noor is. She's a city planner who can weaponize patience. She started collecting photos, dates, a spreadsheet of every tenant we knew whom Felix had encouraged to leave before their renovations. The building's group chat, usually memes and porch cat updates, turned into affidavits. A month later, Felix announced he was running for city council on a platform of cutting red tape. He held a meet and greet in the courtyard of his nicest building, fairy lights strung like promises. He grabbed a bullhorn and began a speech about mom-and-pop landlords, while the news set up a tripod. Noor squeezed my hand and whispered, "Now." Two tenants wheeled out a contraption she'd borrowed from work, a portable air sampler with a little mesh cage. She flipped it on, held it up to a vent, and then to the crowd. "We invite the candidate to tour his units," she said to the camera, "and discuss the mold spores we've been breathing." Felix's smile calcified. He moved toward us, jaw working. "You'll regret this." The exact second the words left his mouth, a city USV turned the corner. A housing inspector stepped out, carrying a clipboard and the exact same model of air sampler. He looked at our group chat printouts, then at Felix's campaign banner, then at the news camera. "We received multiple corroborating complaints today, including from a concerned mayoral staffer." He nodded toward the SUV. The mayor's aide stepped out. Noor didn't know her. I did. We dated years ago and split because my life was a junk drawer. Apparently, she'd kept my number and my building on her radar. Within an hour, the inspector posted a notice to vacate for 2 units and a 72-hour order to remediate. Felix took down his campaign event and replaced his website banner with a statement about haters. 2 weeks later, the council passed a no-renovation eviction without permit ordinance, co-sponsored by the incumbent Felix had hoped to unseat. The Tenants Association made Noor chair. Felix texted me, one word, traitor. I sent back a photo of the repaired ceiling and a selfie of me breathing, with the caption, "Finally not."
Story 9. I produce the morning show at a small-town station where the sign-on prayer is earlier than the farm report. Our star, a folksy meteorologist named Cal, calls himself the voice of reason and everyone else kiddo. He's charismatic and exhausting. Our new co-host, Maris, came from public radio with a spine of titanium. 2 weeks in, she rejected a segment Cal tried to squeeze in about a councilwoman's divorce. He cornered her by the vending machines, smiling for the interns filing by. "Go along," he said softly, "or you'll regret this." The next morning was our quarterly emergency alert system test, those harsh tones that make you sit up straight. The night engineer had cued it. We did the farm prices, the birthdays. Cal teased a fun surprise. At 8:20, I hit the test. The tones blared, everyone listening leaned back from their toast, and then, instead of the pre-recorded FEMA voice, we got audio from a file labeled PSA, Cal, Final.mp3. It was Cal, not on-air Cal, office Cal. "She's den air," he snorted. "We give her traffic and ads. The thinking is mine." Then laughter and a snarl. "If she fights me, I'll make it hell. She'll regret this." In the control room, the board froze, and for a second my heart did too. I hadn't loaded that file. Maris hadn't. The engineer sprinted in, pale. He pointed at the automation log. The file had the same ID as the official EAS PSA because, my throat burned, Cal had named his private rehearsal the same as the safety file and saved it to the shared drive. The scheduler dutifully grabbed the newest timestamp. Phones detonated. Advertisers, the station owner, my mother. We killed the feed, played 6 minutes of instrumental polka to patch the hole. Cal tried to spin it off the break as a comedy bit. Maris, with a steady, read an apology and then asked the audience to give her a moment of editorial clarity. She laid it out. His segment, pitching rumor as public service, the way women's reputations become clicks. The switchboard lit with listeners calling her fierce, precise, hours. At 10 a.m., the owner walked into Studio A, looked at me, kid from the copy desk who never said no, and said, "Can you host for a bit?" Cal removed his headphones like they were handcuffs. As he stepped into the hall, he hissed at Maris, "You'll pay for this." That afternoon, the FCC asked for our EAS logs because hijacking public safety isn't a prank. Cal's contract had a morality clause tied to federal compliance. He tripped on his own naming convention. 2 months later, we moved Maris to lead, and I graduated from producer to co-host. We keep the EAS files in a read-only folder now, named like Weapons, dated like Truth. The first time those tones played under our watch, I felt my ribcage loosen. Our voice of reason became just a voice with nowhere to go at 8 a.m.
Story 10. I'm the new wife, which is a job without training manuals. My husband, Jonah, and his ex, Sarah, co-parent twin teenagers who are smarter than either of us. For years, exchanges happened in a supermarket parking lot under a mural of a smiling carrot. It worked because carrots don't take sides. Then, Jonah's father died, and a will surfaced like a shark's fin. A scholarship fund for family heirs who carry the name forward, a phrase that felt like 1953. Sarah, who'd kept her last name after the divorce, suddenly filed to change the twins' names back to Jonah's. She texted me privately, "Stay out of this, or you'll regret it." We didn't contest the change. Names are not cages. What we did contest was the fund's fine print. It required a letter of recommendation from the patriarch. The patriarch was dead. The lawyer suggested Jonah write it on his behalf. Jonah refused. The twins, Eli and Ray, watched the grown-ups conduct gendered theater over a dead man's money. At the tiny memorial, in a church that smelled like lemon oil and apology, the pastor invited, "Any additional words?" Sarah stood, beautiful and flint, and read a eulogy about legacy that used the word lineage like punctuation. I braced. Then Ray stood up behind her, voice clear as glass. "Grandpa loved crosswords and once helped me cheat at Scrabble by telling me that proper nouns were valid if the table agreed." Soft laughter. "He also told me he wished he'd had the courage to change his own name." Heads turned. "He hated being Junior. He wanted to be himself." Silence. Then Eli unfolded a piece of paper. It was a letter, dated the week before he died, addressed to whoever manages the silly scholarship. In shaky script, open to any descendant who does the work and signs their own name to it, whatever that name is. Family is what you claim, not what's stamped. Attached was an unsigned amendment. He'd tried to get it notarized, but time ran out. The lawyer stepped forward, eyes wide. "This isn't valid," Sarah said quickly, and I felt the old heat rise in me, the courtroom of the parking lot. The lawyer shook his head. "It's not nothing," he said, "and the board sets policy." He looked at the twins. "Do you want to present this to them?" The exact second Sarah leaned towards me and whispered, "If you had stayed out of it, we'd be done." Her phone buzzed. A text from Ray, who was 3 feet away but had a taste for theater. "We're not property. We're people." Then Ray took the mic. "We're keeping our names, both of them, hyphenated if we feel like it. The fund can meet us in the century we live in or watch us get scholarships somewhere else." 2 weeks later, the board voted to adopt the letter as guiding intent. The first check went to a student whose last name matched no one in the room. On the memo line, the committee chair had written, "For the work, not the stamp." After the meeting, Sarah stood by the carrot mural, looked at me, and said, not unkindly, "They were never ours to win." For the first time since I married their dad, we both nodded like teammates. Karma wasn't her losing or me winning. It was the twins writing their names, all of them, in ink no patriarch could edit.
Story 11. I'm a circulating nurse, the person in the OR who anticipates what the surgeon needs before they know they need it. Dr. Kell had hands like metronomes and a mouth like a scalpel. He cut clean and talked dirty about residents, about nurses who overstepped, about patients who were lucky to catch his schedule. 3 months ago, I reported a medication variance. His favorite anesthetic dose kept creeping beyond protocol for bariatric cases. Nothing happened. Then a rep delivered a trial cautery wand, and Kell told me to just log it as in-house stock. I refused. He leaned so close, the LED from his loops glowed on my cheek. "Keep being difficult, and you'll regret this, Aaron." The next day was a cholecystectomy with an obese patient, Mrs. Duarte. Funny, terrified, a teacher who kept apologizing for making it harder. We rolled in. The anesthesiologist, quiet genius named Chowdhury, titrated slowly. Kell sighed theatrically, "Let's not drag this." He called for higher gas. I met Chowdhury's eyes over the drapes. He shook his head. "No." Kell muttered, "Put the scope in." At that exact second, the OR's new safety pilot kicked in. Administration's pet project, a live dashboard tied to our drug cart and patient monitor. The screen flashed yellow, then red, then printed a thermal image from the table. Hypoventilation risk with elevated end-tidal CO2. A soft chime, like a doorbell, went off. Everyone froze. On the big monitor, a banner scrolled. "Protocol exceeded, review required." Kell snapped, "Turn that off." He reached for the rep's wand, the one he'd wanted me to mislog. He stepped on the pedal. Nothing. I'd had Biomed disable it until it went through purchasing. He looked at me like I unplugged his ego. "You'll regret," he started, and then Mrs. Duarte sat dropped. Chowdhury calmly said, "Ventilate," and the resident, bless her, took over, bagging like a human metronome. We stabilized. Post-op, at the Morbidity and Mortality Conference, the safety pilot auto-inserted the event video. The committee watched the banner, watched the dosage creep, watched Kell's foot smash a dead pedal. He called it alarm fatigue. The chair called it a pattern. Chowdhury, who never raises his voice, said, "Aaron prevented use of non-approved equipment." That's why the circuit didn't spark when the drapes were pulling oxygen. Silence. Spark. We all heard the ghost of what could have been. Kell took administrative leave. 2 weeks later, I found a note in my locker from Mrs. Duarte, shaky cursive. "You were the only one who looked at me, not my chart." She included a photo of her class holding thank you signs, marker bleeding through the paper. The hospital kept the pilot. I keep the note next to my badge. Every alarm now sounds like a line I refuse to cross.
Story 12. Land finals smell like energy drinks and fear. I'm the in-game leader for a second-tier squad called Pylon. Our ace, Omi, arrived with a sponsor hoodie and a wrist brace he wore for drama. He also arrived top fragging in ways that made physics blush. I asked to see his config. He laughed. "Worry about your strats," he said, and leaned close enough for me to count mint gum as a macro. "Call another meeting, and you'll regret it."
The tournament rolled out new anti-cheat cameras, overhead rigs that recorded hands and feet. Omi smirked. His hands were angelic. We cruised through quarters, spamming smokes like confetti. In Semi's first map, Omi flicked through a smoke and pre-fired a lurker he shouldn't have known existed. Chat went nuclear. We called a timeout. Our coach whispered, "Something's plugged in under his chair." I leaned down, as if to tie my shoe, and saw the cable. A discreet line from a foot paddle into the hub, bandaged with black tape to pretend it was power. The ref stood 5 feet away. I touched my shoulder, our signal that I'd seen enough. Omi smiled at the crowd, then at me, and said under his breath, "You'll regret this when the orgs call." We came back from timeout and the head ref nodded at the production guy. At the exact second Omi settled for pistol round, the Jumbotron split into quad cam, game feed, face cam, hand cam, and foot cam. Omi's sneaker tapped. The spectator client showed an impossible 180 headshot through a flash. The overhead cam showed the pedal depression perfectly synced with the flick. The arena inhaled the way beaches do before waves break. Omi stood, knocked his chair over so the pedal skittered into the light. He tried to laugh it off as push to talk. The ref held up a rulebook page, finger on the line about unauthorized input. DQ. The sponsor rep disappeared like a magician with a smoke bomb. We forfeited the map, then the match. I expected to feel empty. Instead, I felt clean, like rinsing grit out of your eyes. That night, a DM landed from a rival I'd hated for years. "You did the right thing. Need a real IGL?" A week later, Pylon folded, and 3 of us joined that rival. Omi went dark, then resurfaced streaming tutorials on mental toughness. The foot cam clips live forever. So does the feeling of calling a mid-round rotation you can actually earn.
Story 13. After my divorce, I adopted a senior greyhound named Cricket, a lanky old queen who slept like she'd paid the mortgage. 6 months later, my ex, Lane, decided he missed his girl and started showing up at the dog park with treats and a Bluetooth speaker that blasted a playlist of us from 2017. Cricket accepted the treats and ignored the rest, like a true diva. When Lane saw the new collar, engraved with my address, he smirked. "Collars change," he said. "Memories don't." He posted a carousel on Instagram, 10 photos of him and Cricket back in the day, captions like, "Soulmates deserve reunion." DMs rolled in from his friends calling me petty. Then he texted, "Bring her by this Sunday or you'll regret this." Sunday came. I didn't bring her. He came to me instead, scooping Cricket into his arms outside the coffee shop while I balanced 2 lattes. He said, "I'm taking my dog." The barista gasped. The patio went still. I reached for my phone. He laughed. "What are you going to do? Call the cops? We both know whose name is on her microchip." We did. At the exact second he said, "Microchip," a woman at the next table, sensible shoes, municipal lanyard, stood up. "Hi, I'm Animal Control. Off duty, but not that off." She asked for IDs and scanned Cricket with a reader she somehow had in her tote like a superhero carrying her emblem. The chip pinged Lane's name and an address he no longer lived at. He smirked. "See?" The officer nodded, and then scanned again, slower. A second ping. She looked at me. "You re-registered?" I nodded. When I adopted Cricket, the rescue had added their backup chip. "Who's the primary contact on the rescues file?" the officer asked. I pulled up the email. Paperwork from the rescue showing the transfer to me after the shelter found Cricket tied to a fence the week after my divorce. Lane had rehomed her when he moved in with someone who didn't like dog hair. The officer's face changed. She called dispatch, confirmed the chain. The rescue director texted back in all caps, "Do not release to Lane." The patio watched Lane's jaw do math. The officer handed Cricket back to me and wrote Lane a citation for attempted theft of an animal. He sputtered, "You'll regret sicking bureaucracy on me." Cricket yawned. The barista brought me a muffin on the house with a note stuck in it, for Cricket's legal fees. That night, I turned off Instagram and turned on the radio. Cricket pressed her head to my knee like a stamp finding the right envelope. There's a kind of paperwork nobody tells you feels like love. Story 14. I was 17, riding the tram home with a backpack full of flyers for a climate rally and exactly €3.20 rattling in my pocket. The inspector got on at Porta Romana, a man whose uniform was too tight in the manners. He scanned tickets like he was scraping gum. Across from me, a woman in a hotel housekeeping uniform sat with a little boy asleep on her lap, his shoes lit up when the tram bumped. The inspector aimed at her. She fumbled for a crumpled ticket, hands shaking. It had expired 15 minutes earlier. He puffed up, launched into a speech about personal responsibility, volume set to humiliate. She whispered, "My shift ran long." He said, "Not my problem." She reached for her wallet. He snapped, "Fine plus ID." She murmured that she didn't have her permit on her. She was new here, still figuring things out. His smile became a weapon. "You'll regret trying to play dumb." I stood up without knowing what I'd say, and the inspector squared his shoulders at me. "Sit," he barked. The tram driver slowed like she could feel the mood through the rails. The PA crackled. "We are paused for a ticket check," she said evenly. At the exact second the inspector began writing the fine, another man in plain clothes by the door flashed a badge so fast it looked like a magician's trick. He spoke quietly into his lapel, and then, louder, "Transit audit. Random ride-along." The inspector blinked. "Random what?" The auditor glanced at the little boy with the light-up shoes, then back to the woman. "Ma'am, did you board before or after midnight?" She nodded. "After." He turned to the inspector. "You're aware of the grace policy for workers leaving late-night shifts, yes? The memo sent last week?" The inspector's pen paused. "Memo?" The auditor pulled up a screen, an internal notice extending the expiration window between midnight and 1 a.m. due to tram delays, driver shortage, city construction. Her ticket was valid. Mine was too. The inspector's face went sunset red. The auditor took the fine from his hand, tore it neatly, and then, this part lives rent-free in my chest, handed the woman 2 48-hour passes. "Courtesy of the Agency for Essential Workers," he said. The little boy woke and whispered, "Grazie," to the world. As we pulled into my stop, the driver cracked a PA again. "Remember, rules apply to everyone. Compassion applies first." The inspector stared at his shoes, then at the badge he didn't have. I got off and handed the woman one of my flyers without thinking. She tucked it into her pocket like a Saints card. I went home and wrote a new sign for the rally. Policy is a person. Somewhere. The next week, I saw the auditor on another tram. He didn't see me. He was busy reading people like tickets and choosing to stamp OK.